Oh, music's over. All right. Welcome, everyone.
That's your cue.
Just messing. Another edition of the Irish Breakdown Podcast. I'm Vince D'Addario. That's Brian Driscoll. And we got a fun topic for everybody today. We are going to talk about spring practice since that is right around the corner. I mean, March is next week. And spring practice starts in March.
First practice is on March 17th, which means as of tomorrow, it'll be 3 weeks away.
Crazy.
So what better time to kick off our coverage of spring football and with what we're going to discuss today, you
Absolutely.
know? So it's going to be fun because this is going to be a very interesting spring, Vince.
Oh, there's no question about it.
Very interesting spring.
Look, we haven't had a new coach for spring in over a decade, right? So, I mean, that by itself makes things interesting. And then you've got a big turnover on staff and you've got all these different things going on. And so a new quarterback, again, lots of things going on. So what we're going to talk about today, what are the main objectives for this Notre Dame football team going into the spring? So if we were sitting down with the coaching staff and we said, okay, look, what do we want to get accomplished over the next 15 practices or whatever it is, right? What do we want to have, not set in stone, we're not talking depth chart necessarily, but like where do we want to be coming out of spring and going into summer? Right. That's what we're going to talk about.
Because it's about laying that foundation, that on-field foundation, right? Like part of the foundation is kind of already started when you look at, what they've done in the weight room and classroom and workouts and stuff like that.
Right.
But, what's the on-field connection? Because, look, it's taken a while to get this staff put together, which is good.
Absolutely.
Good things are worth waiting for. I love the staff that they put together. I would have rather him taken the time he took, Coach Freeman we're referring to get this staff than have rushed and gotten a different staff, right? I mean, that's the thing. But, now it's about step one towards establishing who this team is going to be.
Exactly.
Right. And it's not even going to be the first time the 2022 team is on the field because there's going to be some guys not out there on this spring that'll be out there in the fall. So, Notre Dame has to establish an identity. They have to establish a connection in in who this football team is going to be. And Vince, it starts off with the coaches connecting.
Yes.
Look, Tommy Rees has got a whole new staff around him, right? And there's only one of those guys he's familiar with when it comes to working together. That's Harry Heastand.
That was a while back.
Right. That's not that long ago, but but he knows him well is the point, right? Like he knows what to expect from Harry Heastand on a daily basis is what I'm referring to. And so, but Deland McCullough and Chancey Stuckey, these are all guys that obviously Tommy Rees had a big role in getting to Notre Dame. But just because you like the guy doesn't mean that you necessarily know what it's like to work with him, right? I mean, those are things that you have to develop. So the number one thing for this football team or this in the spring is just going to be that staff connection. It's just getting everybody on the coaching staff sort of, okay, this is what Marcus Freeman does. This is what he wants. This is how things are going to go. Because in lead up to the bowl game, there was only so much change Marcus Freeman could bring about. It's still capping off the season.
Sure.
Now you really are going to say to Coach Freeman, whatever you want this team to be starts now. And you've got to make sure that all 10 of your assistants and all the analysts and all the GAs and all the everybody understands this is who we need to be. I'm going to set the tone. I need you guys to back me up, which means you've got to live it in your meetings. You've got to live it in the weight room. You've got to live it on the practice field. These are the things that we're going to demand. And, that's going to start, in my opinion, right now. And that's step number one. Step number two for me, Vince, is, it's a culture change, right? And this is truly the first on-field attempt at a culture change. I don't think you can really make a culture change in December leading up to the bowl game. You can change, practice structure. You're going to do more tempo, things like that. But a culture change takes time. It started in January when guys got back from the break to start their workouts. It's about creating more competition, right? It's about creating a sense of getting rid of that entitlement that I think a lot of veteran players have had over the years where, hey, you're a veteran. It's your turn now, but you got to earn it, right? I mean, that's a part of it too.
And we saw a little bit of that competition at practice for the bowl games. But again, there's only so much that you can instill that quickly. And it's a bunch of new coaches.
And it's competition to me is in two different things, right? That's a great point, Vince. I mean, those were with different coaches and different
Right.
ideas of what the depth chart should look like. To me, competition is twofold. Competition is O-line versus D-line and corners versus safeties and receivers versus corners and safeties and tight ends versus safeties and running backs versus linebackers. That's not what that's part of it, right? That's a big part of it. That's not it though. It's also has to be about competition within each position group. Right? Like, hey, man, just because you started last year,
Gotcha.
just because
Nothing's a given.
everybody's this or the or that doesn't mean that you're just walking in. And I think there's been that sense of entitlement for years, really. And this isn't necessarily this goes back to Charlie Weiss. That was a big problem under Charlie Weiss. It kind of continued under Brian Kelly, not as bad as it was under Charlie Weiss. But it's still a sense of, hey, once you kind of get there, you're the guy now. And
right.
And that's why I think we've seen some guys maybe not finish their careers on as high a notes as maybe they should have because, is that fire still there? Right. So I want to see a sense of accomplishment in that regard or a sense of competitive competition in that regards as well. I think this spring is going to be about instilling confidence in this football team, and that kind of goes to the culture change as well. This needs to be a team that has legitimate confidence, not the false swagger, the fake confidence, but a team that just really buys into you are as good as anybody. You can beat anybody, and you need to go about your business every day like a champion because that's the expectation. And then part of that, it all comes down to the excuses we have seen play out over the years. Gone. Like this year, at this time a year ago, we heard all the excuses about how young they were, and and Marcus Freeman's going to have
over.
Oh yeah. And Marcus Freeman's going to have every opportunity in the world to make excuses for the spring. They're going to have 5 scholarship receivers, including Matt Salerno, right? They're going to be down to 3 scholarship tight ends in the spring because Kane Barong's probably not going to be full go. There's going to be positions where they're not going to have guys. And in the past, it's like, guys are out. But hey, no excuses, man. We still got practice. We still got, that's what I want to see. I want to see that no excuses mentality be brought to Notre Dame. That existed so long ago that we haven't seen in a long time. Like, I don't care how many scholarship receivers you have. Go make it work, right?
Because that would be so we got used to at the beginning of the spring or the beginning of the fall hearing narratives already being put out there for us to feast on. Does that make sense? Like, it's a really young team, just kind of how you mentioned that, right? And if it was this year, it would be, we're so young at wide receiver and we just don't have the numbers.
Right.
And
it's got Avery out and Joe's out.
I mean, the excuses would be on the tip of the tongue of the head coach. They just would be, we don't want to do much with Michael Mayer. And so we're really going to be short on numbers at tight end. And, all of these different things, you would hear them. And it would be a litany of excuses. That's what I call them. I call them excuses. They were, and put up there, and then if they happen to overcome it, well, then we overcame this huge problem that we had.
Right.
Or if it's a problem, well, I told you that it was going to be, So I'm very interested, and I'm not saying that I'm expecting Marcus Freeman to make excuses, but I'm interested to see how he approaches his first gathering with the media when spring starts.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, what are we going to hear? I want to hear, hey, man, we're short here, but we're going to go after it. We're going to do this. We're going to do that.
I don't even want to say, hey, we're short here. Like, I feel like that's
going to be a pointed question from somebody. Like, they're going to be like,
well,
you're
hey,
short.
You know what? Like, I'm not worried about that. We're going to go out there. We're going to compete. We're going to get better every day. I don't care if we got 5 receivers or 2 receivers or 1 receiver, whatever. We don't have a game to get ready for. That's not an excuse.
And it's an opportunity for so-and-so to do this.
5 guys. Hey, look, it's a great. Yeah, exactly. We know what Avery can do. We know what Joe can do. This is going to be a great opportunity for Jaden and Dion and Lorenzo to go out there and, that's what I want to hear. I don't want to hear, well, it's going to be tough and all this kind of stuff. So to me, that goes into the culture change. And then the final piece to me for the spring, Vince, is leadership has to emerge. And that's from the coaching level, which we kind of just talked about, but also at the player level.
Sure.
And who are the guys that kind of step up and say, hey, look, this is my team now. Right. And I got this. I want to see who that's going to be, because the thing is some of the guys that will end up being leaders in the fall are going to not be practicing in the spring. So there's only so much Avery Davis, for example, can do when he's not out there practicing.
No question.
Right? I mean, he's going to be there, and he's going to be a leader, and I would assume
Absolutely.
a captain again. But again, that's a different type of situation we're talking about. We're talking about who's that leader on the field, who's gonna take hold in the huddle, because Avery's not there. Is it just going to be Jarrett Patterson? Does somebody else step up? Does Michael Mayer become more of a vocal leader, or is he going to stay sort of which I kind of think he's better at him? Hey, do as I do.
Yeah, right.
Which is fine. Not everybody has to be a vocal leader.
No question.
But who's going to be that guy in the receiver room? Who's going to be that guy in the running back room? Who's going to be that guy at quarterback that steps up and says, hey, fellas, I got this. We're good. Let's do this. Defensively, I think it'll be a little bit easier. I think there's more guys like that on defense. Offense is really one of the main questions for me that I look at and say that. But, we'll kind of get into more of that.
Sure.
As we get closer to the spring. But those are the team things that I'm really looking forward to seeing as we transition to really Marcus Freeman's first football team, because that was what we saw in January 1. That wasn't Marcus Freeman's first football team. That was Marcus Freeman finishing Brian Kelly's last football team.
He was basically an interim. I mean, he was an interim for all intents and purposes. I mean, to finish off that season. Yes, he was the head coach. He was hired. I get all of that. But it felt like he was an interim
role,
to finish
to your
off
point,
season.
the role is no different than what an interim coach would normally do in a similar situation. Right? There's only so much. You're not going to completely
You're
change
getting them to the finish line.
Right.
You're getting them to the finish line.
And that's exactly what he said. We're going to finish strong. Finish strong.
Absolutely. And
they didn't finish as strong.
Well,
right.
He got them to the finish line. I mean, that's
right. But they finished, just not the way that necessarily they wanted to finish.
Yeah, and nor did we. But the leadership point, I think, is very interesting, Brian, from a especially from the offensive side. And I don't know if that's going to be one of your points that we make moving forward, but
that's why I wanted to kind of get it out as a team.
I really like that, because there's so many guys that this offense is going to be counting on that maybe they weren't counted on last year. I mean, there's going to be guys in new roles, new positions. They may not be a rotation guy anymore. Maybe now they're a starter, or whatever the case may be. So where is that leadership going to come from? I think that is intriguing. I really do. And so some of that has already started with the offseason conditioning and the group leaders and things like that. But I want to see it with my own eyes. Like, I want to see who those leaders are going to be. You know what I mean? And so that is actually very intriguing to me moving into the spring.
Right. So let's talk offense, Vince.
Let's do that.
I think we look at it. What we're going to do here is kind of look at the three things that we think, and we have differences here.
We do.
We kind of, I did my list, Vince did his list, and we'll, kind of bring it together and discuss it. But, what are the main objectives that we want to see this spring? When we look back at the end of spring, what are we hoping that this team got accomplished?
Right.
On offense? And I think that's the big key. And for me, to me, there's nothing more important than the core. I would love to see the quarterback battle decided by the end of spring. Doesn't have to be. It's not going to mean if that doesn't happen, the team's going to suck. It just means, now look, and they're going to probably not pick a starter verbally. I'm talking about when we're at practice, when we're talking to people, it's like, look, everybody knows who the quarterback's going to be.
Right.
Right. And that's kind of how it was at the end of last spring. Like, we heard Brian, it's going to go in the fall. Everybody knew by the end of spring who the quarterback was.
Oh,
right?
absolutely.
Jack Cohn had seized hold of that job, and it was Jack Cohn's job. And, whether it's Drew Pine or, look, I'm going to be honest. I think if for Notre Dame to be the best team that they can be, it needs to be Tyler Buchner. I think Drew Pine, you can win a lot of games with Drew Pine.
Absolutely.
I love Drew Pine. But for Notre Dame to take that next step and eat a championship, to win a championship. Sorry, Tommy Guns.
I was going to say, I know exactly what you read.
But for Notre Dame to win a championship, I think Tyler Buchner needs to be that guy. He's that difference maker. But is he going to be able to go out there and seize hold of that job? Which means, it's fine that you're going to make plays with your legs. But if I'm Notre Dame, I think you can make two mistakes this spring with Tyler Buchner. One is you get too wrapped up in what he does with his legs.
Yeah.
Number two is you remove the legs from the equation so much that you take away what he does best. You have to find that balance. And with him, and I think this is a mistake that they made with Brandon Wimbush going into 2018. They were so focused on developing him as a passer that they took away his running desire, his running ability, his running scheme. Like they tried to turn him into something that he wasn't. instead of enhancing what he does well, but then also improving the areas where he's got to improve. So obviously for Tyler, it's gonna be somewhat natural this spring, meaning, you're not getting ready for a game. So you don't have to say, hey, this is the niche we're going to prepare you for. It's just go run the offense, right? Go do what you do. So, for Tyler Buchner, it's going to be about, making better decisions, cleaning up your technique, being really just consistent on a day-to-day basis. I mean, that's going to be the thing for Tyler. If he can be consistent on a daily basis, then I think the talent kind of takes over. I think it's that consistency that right now is going to be the big question mark from him, just from drill to drill and practice to practice and that kind of thing. But if they can kind of have an idea of who the quarterback is by the end of spring, then I think you start to see people kind of start to gravitate to that guy, right? And I think that's something that would be beneficial for this football team going into fall camp.
Sure, and I feel like they did that with Phil a little bit too. I mean, they took his legs and his creativity out of his game, and he suffered for it, right?
Right.
And so you're right. I think that they need to know who Tyler Buchner is, and they need to embrace what he is. And I know that sounds ridiculous to us because we believe we know who Tyler Buchner is, and we've talked ad nauseum about
what he can bring
to the table.
we know
right.
We know what he can be.
Right. And what that looks like, right? And we've talked about that a bunch. He's not just going to sit in the pocket and pick you apart. Can he do that? Yeah, he can do that. But to be the best version of himself, to be a championship level quarterback, it's more than just that. And so, there's certain days where you're probably going to tell him, hey, stay in the pocket, do these different things.
Right.
But there's also going to be days where you don't do that. You know what I mean?
And I don't even honestly. I think that's interesting. I almost wonder if it can be detrimental to tell him, hey, stay in the pocket today. Okay. I think what it more about is you design your practice around that stuff, right? And it's like, hey, we're going to drop back, we're going to throw the ball, we're going to work on our play action, we're going to work on our RPO game. We're going to work on those aspects of the game. And then, if he takes off running, then you correct it in that, hey, here was your read.
Right.
I feel like if you force him into sitting in the pocket, then you're going to force him to get into a mindset of, I can't run. And that's the thing. It's more about, hey, let him do what he does, but make sure that you're designing things. So like, I'm not running any RPOs with the quarterback draw a lot in the spring. Some of it, because it's going to be what you do, but I'm not running a lot of it, right? What that basically means is a lot of times, especially out of spread sets, is you'll run quick concepts. Quarterback makes a read of the overhang and, got a 5-yard outcut. If that defender kind of goes with the outcut, you just tuck it and you run. The line's blocking for a draw, right? So it's basically a 6-man box. If that guy leaves the box, you replace. Because if that guy stays in, you're banging the outcut or the outside fade, right? I wouldn't run that a ton, but at the same time, I don't want Tyler to think like, oh, gee, I have to stay back here. I can't run. It's more about correcting him like, hey, man, okay, nice run, but why'd you go away from this read? Right? It's about correcting the decision as opposed to eliminating the thing that he does well, because I think if you do that, then one of two things can happen. Number one is you take away that aggressiveness as a runner, which I don't think you necessarily want to do. And then number two, once that's back into the mix, he hasn't had to make that decision-making process as much. Right. And so that's the challenge that you have with a kid like Tyler Buchner, because he is a good thrower. I think he's a more natural thrower than Brandon Wimbush was in 17 and 18. Now, Brandon was a different kid coming out of high school, but from what Brandon was in 17 and 18. And so I think you need to enhance that as opposed to taking away from this other part. That's not always an easy line to balance. And so that's why I say I wouldn't tell him not to run. I would just correct the read.
Well, that's what spring's all about. It's correction and slowing things down and doing things one step at a time. I mean, that's what spring is for, because like you said, you're not preparing for a game. And so yes, you have finite amount of time to work on stuff, but it's still way more spread out than it is with a game prep week. Right. And so this is that opportunity to, you can talk through reads and you can talk through mistakes, and it's okay. I mean, there's nothing wrong with that, right? And that's what it's for.
Right. So I just that's my thing, is I don't want them to get into a whole lot of, like, there may be times, there may be certain periods, 7-on-7, I don't want him thinking about running.
No,
But
that's
anytime they
ridiculous.
get into a team period, anytime they're doing something like that, I want him to think I can go make a play if I need to, because
Yeah.
that's who he is. So that'll be the interesting thing, is how do they balance that? Because they made a mistake with the way that they prepared Brandon Wimbush going into 2018. They did, and they can't make that same mistake with Tyler Buckner. And I know the desires. We got to get him better as a passer. That's fine. Get him better as a passer within the framework of who he is.
Right.
That's going to be the key for me. What was your number? Your number one had a little bit to do with a little different position group.
Yeah, well, and it's funny. I ranked them 1, 2, 3, but it wasn't necessarily my most important.
Well,
it
what's
was
your
as they
most
came to my
important?
head. My most
What's your
important
most
is one we're
important?
going to talk about next, and I think we have the similar one. So I'll go with what I was going to say originally.
Okay.
So it's who's going to be your number 2 tight end. I think that's important. And yes, Kane Barong is not going to be available due to his injury and everything like that. And I totally get that. But you're going to get massive amounts of reps for the 3 scholarship tight ends that are still on your roster.
Mm-hmm.
Kevin Bauman, Michael Mayer, Mitchell Evans, right? Those are the 3
Right.
guys that are going to get a massive amount of reps. And it was understood that who was going to be the number 2 tight end before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Now that's not the case. So that spot's wide open. And the number 2 tight end at Notre Dame is incredibly important. They have shown us that in the past, and I don't see that changing anytime soon.
And I'm okay with that, by the way.
Oh, and so am I.
Like,
I'm not upset about that in any way. You need to figure out who that guy is going to be, right? And is it going to be a timeshare situation? Is it going to be one guy? And it doesn't have to be set in stone, because again, you don't have Kane Barong, in spring practice. And so I get that part too. But I think that picture needs to be a little bit clearer coming out of spring, going into the fall.
Right. I think one thing about this, Vince, that we have to remember is having 5 receivers and 3 tight ends isn't as damaging now as it is in the fall.
Absolutely.
The reason why is you have one team in spring. In the fall, you may only have 5 receivers up with your varsity going through reps. The rest of your guys are down running a scout team.
Right.
You only may have 3 tight ends up with your varsity. I don't know how else to say that. Not the other guys are going to be running scout team. In the spring, it's good on good the whole spring. So you can get by with that, right? So it's not the difficulty is for Chancey Stuckey and Jared Parker in drills. Because what can happen where you can really run a guy down is if you only have 5 receivers in drills, normally you have 10. You're going to, like, all of a sudden you're just, okay, we're working through these drills real quick, getting a ton of reps. You're like, okay, just pump the brakes a little bit on that. Like, make sure that we're not working. Now, The nice thing is the technology that Notre Dame uses now, they can start to see, like, okay, the last 2 days, our receiver, miles
GPS
per hour
trackers. Yeah.
Right. Like, they've gone down 2-3 miles an hour just consistently. They've worn out, right? We're running them a little bit too much, right? And so those are the things I think that they need to monitor. It's more of the individual drill periods, making sure that you're not just you only got 5 guys. You can't. I mean, gosh, there's times coaching D3 where we'd have 10 quarterbacks or 18 receivers. It's like you're like, man, it's like, how can I get enough reps for everybody? Well, this is the opposite danger of
exactly.
You're getting a million reps for these guys, and you need to balance the desire to maximize the reps for the healthy guys without running them down. And so I think that's the thing we have to understand about this is it's not as crushing to have 5 receivers in the spring as it is the fall. It's basically what you're in is for 15 practices. It's just you're good on good. It's your varsity. That's it. You eliminated the scout teams.
Right.
Is basically what you've done from a number standpoint. And so I think that's the thing we have to consider. The numbers are not good, but it's not as bad as it would be if this was the situation in the fall.
Yep.
So to your point, I think that is going to be good for Mitchell Evans and Kevin Bauman because both have a lot to prove.
Absolutely.
Because there's going to be Kane Barong back in the fall and summer. There's going to be Eli Raridan at some point in time early next year. There's going to be Holden Stay showing up. And if you don't separate yourself and make an impact now,
you're going to be forgotten. I mean, are you going to be on the back burner at least?
It's a lot easier for the guy behind you to pass you up when you get to the spring.
And from a rep standpoint, there are, I think, 3 off the top of my head walk-on tight ends as well. I mean, so some of those second and third team reps.
Individual drills, yeah.
In the individual drills, you're going to have opportunities to get a rest and get a sip and all those different things. So it's not like it's just going to be 3 guys going through all these drills and operating on all 3 teams and all of these different things. So there are guys to take up some of those reps, right? And so so there is that. But we're talking first team, who's going to be that second tight end? Because that's essentially a 12th starter.
Right.
You know?
Yeah. And one of the things you can do to kind of help him sort of deal with this is one position group that won't be short on numbers is running back.
That's true.
And I believe Sebo Flemister will be part of the team in the spring.
Okay.
So I think Jadarian Price is an early enrollee, so they'll have 5 running backs. They're going to have as many running backs as receivers. Thanks, Dell. That's phenomenal that you did that. But I think that's with the shortage of tight ends and receivers. I think that's an area where during team and 7-on-7, you can get a lot of your 20 and 21 personnel work in the spring. So I think that's hey, look, Absolutely. This is the whole thing. It's about your mindset. Oh, do you want to piss and moan and cry that you can't run 11 personnel all spring because you don't have enough receivers, or you can't run 12 personnel all spring because you have enough tight ends? Or you can say, hey, man, look, this is a great chance for us to get some 20, 21 personnel work in, right? Because we got 5 healthy backs. We've got, these kids can do different things. Hey, let's go see what Audric can do. Let's go see what Jadarian can do. Let's go see what Chris Tyree can do. Yeah. Let's go see what Logan Diggs can do in the pass game. And so I think that's kind of goes back to that original thing, Vince, of the no excuses, right? It's change the culture. Embrace your current circumstance and say, hey, look, this is what's going to allow us to go be successful, and we can really enhance this 2021 personnel package. So that way, when you go into the fall, you feel really good about, hey, here's where we are in our 2021 personnel. We feel really good about that. Now, when you get to spring or to summer and fall, now you can say, okay, now let's work our 11 and our 12 into that more.
Right.
And I think that's how you take advantage of your circumstance. It's like this. Hey, this is the hand we're dealt. How do we make the most of it? How do we say we're going to turn this into something awesome? Right. And that to me is one of the things you can do to go along with that and take some of the pressure off the tight ends and receivers.
Yeah. Yep. Being creative.
Our number 2. Go ahead, Vince.
I was just to say being creative. I love that because that's what we think Tommy Rees is going to be really good at, is being creative with this offense. Right. And so this is a great opportunity to show that right off the bat in spring practice. So I completely agree with that. And I think it's exciting.
Yep. Number 2, we're kind of on the same page. For me, number 2 is there has to be a complete overhaul mentally and culturally on the offensive line. And to me, I know you kind of said yours like a little bit different, Vince. Yours was, what you sent to me, yours was kind of get acclimated to Harry Heastan. I think that's kind of, we're saying the same thing.
Yes, absolutely.
There needs to be a culture change in the offensive line. It's all that stuff you learned before, gone, right? This is about what we do. I'm not going to criticize Coach Quinn. I'm not going to do that. It's not about that. It's about, this is what I do. So I don't want to hear, like, that was the thing that would drive me nuts when you're a young coach and you work at 4 schools in 5 years, which, that a lot of school kids, a lot of young coaches do that. You're always replacing somebody that some kids liked, or they did. Well, Coach so-and-so, I don't care what Coach so-and-so did. We're going to do what I'm doing. There's a reason I'm here. There's a reason that they brought me back. You know what I mean? There's a reason I put however many guys in the first round of the NFL draft. We're going to do it my way. And that's referring to, like, if you're Coach Heastan. And so to me, the culture change has to be about, he's got to learn how to best connect with this group of players. Right. And then how to get them kind of to embrace what he's demanding of them. And then the offensive lineman, the leadership, Jarrett Patterson, Josh Lugg, those guys have to be all in on, hey, we're going to do what Coach Heastan says.
Because they have experience with him. They have experience with him.
Lugg does.
And so the younger guys are going to look. Right. But he was recruited by Harry, right? No, not at all.
Jarrett Patterson was not. Harry was going to get Nicholas Pettit-Frere from Ohio State.
Oh,
was going to be his 5th lineman. And then when he left, Holian and then Quinn went out and got Jarrett Patterson. Who had been committed to Arizona State.
Gotcha.
So they flipped him from Arizona State.
Thank you for the refresher. But they're going to be looking at those older guys, right? And specifically Lugg, for how do we respond and how do we react to this new guy that just came in, this fire and brimstone guy who's completely different than our last coach.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. So there has to be a culture change, and it goes both ways. Your job as a coach is to say, hey, here's who I am. Here's what I do. but I've got to find what buttons work best for Jarrett Patterson, what buttons work best for Josh Lugg, what buttons work best for Blake Fisher. And they then have to learn what you like, what you want, what your expectations are as a coach. And it's that coming to that meeting of the mind, so to speak, is going to make this thing work. But it's about changing the culture. We're going to practice different. We're going to prepare different, like little things, right? And you come to my meeting without a pencil, you're going back to your dorm and you're going to go get a pencil and you're going to miss everything we're doing. And by the way, see me after practice, right? Little things, like everything is like, Alex Barrs talked about this. It's just everything had to be perfect with Coach Heastand. And because when you get to a game, it's not going to be perfect. But if you're always striving for that perfection, and the standard is about do it right every single time, that's how you get to a game. And you're just, you're just focused on, you got to do your job. It's about developing a culture of, we're going to fight, we're going to scrap, we're going to claw, we're going to be backyard brawlers, man. That's who we're going to be, and establishing that mindset. And if we're not coming off the line, and if we're not moving them, 3 yards off the ball, I'm not going to be happy. Right. And those are the things you look at and say, it's about a whole culture change. Like
this mindset.
Last spring, man, this was one of the most embarrassing offensive line performances I've ever seen. I mean, I'd see the videos that you'd send me, and the video, because you would record things because you were there, and I'd see the videos they put out, and it just was like, oh my gosh. I'd talk to sources and they'd be like, the offensive lines. I mean, it's like there's plays where it looks like they're running a screen.
Yeah.
Like they're just four dudes running through.
The defensive front was just living in the offensive backfield. Just living.
You can't do that. Like, so it's I want to see the opposite. I want to see the defensive players getting frustrated at the end of spring because they're just not able to make plays, because that's how you make each other better. So that was our kind of our number 2, Vince. And Absolutely. Then number 3, we kind of had a little bit of a difference there, Vince. You kind of your focus on number 3 was more about the receivers, right? So we explain kind of
absolutely.
what you're looking for there.
Well, it's similar to my argument with tight ends, but from a receiving standpoint, these guys need to get massive reps, because it's pretty much a brand new group of guys that is going to be there. And yes, Avery Davis is out. He's a veteran. He'll be back eventually in the fall. But the guys that are there, Deion Colsey, Lorenzo Styles. Deion Colsey looked lost at times last year, right? Because he just wasn't getting the reps that he needed. And
the instruction, correct.
Or the instruction, exactly.
Right.
And so this is going to be an opportunity. Yeah, you've got a brand new position coach, but this is going to be an opportunity for those guys to get a ton of reps and get a ton of experience under their belts. And I think that's going to be so valuable moving into the fall when Joe and Avery come back into the fold, and then anybody else that they add if they do. But this is an opportunity for these young guys to get a barrel full of reps and just get comfortable being out there. Because if anybody said that Deion Colsey looked comfortable when he was out there, they're fooling themselves, because he didn't look comfortable.
People would say that about him when they'd be at practice, and it's like one-on-ones where you can just kind of go play and not think about all that stuff. The talent is there.
Absolutely.
We're gonna do kind of previews of the different positions leading into the spring, and I can't wait to talk about Deion Colsey in this receiver group, because, like you said, Vince, there's some opportunities there for them to really show something like, hey, sorry you missed spring, but this is mine now.
And I want to see Dayton Thomas, and I want to see Lorenzo Styles getting first team reps, and that whole group. This is going to be so beneficial to them. I really do believe that, and just rep after rep after rep, I think is going to be great for them.
Right, exactly. For me, my third thing is about identity. Who are you going to be, right? And really starting to establish that now. Like, look, if you want to be a team that is a physical, run game with speed on the perimeter and play actions and RPOs and all that kind of stuff, that's fine. That's not identity to me, right? Like, that's scheme. Identity to me is, who do we want to be? Do we want to be a fast team or not, right? That's not about play calling. That's about how you prepare. That's about how you move from drill to drill. That's about how you run your tempo drills. That's about how you run your team drills. It's about how you coach. If you want to be a team that is an aggressive, attacking, on-the-go team, then you practice that way. If you want to be a perfection team, and you want to be a team where we're perfect preparation is what we're about, which means if we have to run a play 5 straight times to do it right, then we're going to do that. There's 2 completely different ways to go about practice, right, Vince? One is just on to the next play. Let's go. We'll fix it in the film room. they both work. There's,
Right.
you know what I mean? They're both
Depends
fine.
on what your identity wants to be. Yeah.
Right.
Absolutely.
Establish that. Who do you want to be? Are you a team that wants to run 1,000,000 plays and just go fast? Or are you a team that says, hey, we're fine running 65 plays, but we're going to run the heck out of those 65 plays. We're going to average about 7.5 yards per play, and we're going to be a super efficient offense. Both of those ways work. I'm fine either way. Sure. But establish who you want to be and then prepare that way every single day. And to me, that, Vince, is the thing that I look at and say, they got to figure out who they want to be. Now, I'm a part of identity is we're going to be physical and all that, but that's more of, again, that's an identity part. I'm not concerned about, because you can be physical running inside zone, you can be passive running inside zone. It's the mindset that has to be established, right? And so it's not so much about inside zone as much as it is about, hey, we're gonna go out there and we're gonna just be physical. I don't care if we're running counter, whatever we're doing. We're coming off and we're going to drive you off the ball.
We're going to look for somebody in the other jersey and just bury them, whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
So those things I look at. And again, if you're a team if you want to be a team that's about being explosive, then you need to practice that way. If you're a team that's about precision and perfection and efficiency, then you need to practice that way. And I don't always think that this program is practiced in a way that created an identity. It was always so scheme related under Brian Kelly that it wasn't as much about, like, the 2017 team was the one exception because they were forced to do that because they were so limited on the perimeter. And so to me, it's not about the scheme. It's not about the X's and O's. That stuff will come. Absolutely. I have zero concern about Tommy Rees designing plays that are going to work in the fall.
Right.
It's more about, okay, what kind of mentality are you building to get to that point, right? So when you go play Ohio State on September 3rd, I have no doubt that Tom Rees is going to have a play sheet that if it works, is going to big plays here and scores there and this kind of thing. I have no doubt about that. But if the mindset is right, if the discipline isn't there, if the identity hasn't been established to where those kids just, this is who we are and we're going to be great at it, it's about how you prepare, not what you're preparing, right? So it's not about the double post concept. It's not about that. Those things are fine. We're going to be about fundamentals. We're going to be about perfection. We're going to be the most disciplined football team. Because here's the thing. If you're not going to be the most talented team on the field every Saturday, then you have to be the smartest. You have to be the most disciplined. You have to be the most fundamentally sound. And that's what was so frustrating is, like, you complain about how you don't have the playmakers that other teams have, but then you don't take the fundamentals seriously. It's the stupidest thing I've ever heard of in my life. If you're going to if you don't have the players, then you need to make up for that by being the most precise, perfection-oriented. Fundamentals have to be everything. My receivers have to know everything about being, their craft. They have to be they have to be perfectionists when it comes to their craft.
Absolutely.
Right. And so it's like you wanted to run an offense that was built around, we're just going to be better than you, but then you would complain about how you're not better than the best teams on your schedule. And so that's what I want to see Coach Rees do. Look, you've got the mind for it, right? Like, that's the thing, Coach. You've got the mind for it. You're a smart dude, but you got to get this offense to the point where it's about the little things. It's about, it's about being able to push them tempo wise. It's about, having an identity of, we're going to play this game the right way. And if we get down to it and we can only run 5 plays for whatever reason, we're going to know how to run those 5 plays out of 75,000 different formations.
Right,
you know what
exactly.
I mean? Because our kids know how to play. And that's the thing that I want to see on offense, Vince, is that establishing that identity of who you want to be and then go out there and practice it. I mean, I would like to see Notre Dame be able to push the tempo, but I don't think this team needs to be a North Carolina pedal to the metal team. I think this team, to me, is going to be built more like the Alabama team from 2020. Now, I'm not saying they're going to be as good. What I'm referring to is just,
the mindset.
Alabama that year did, they ran a lot of plays, but they were super efficient team, right? And you kind of look at it and you say, man, that's an offense that, to me, just, it's not about the same thing as it is for Clemson and others. Like LSU in 2015, just ran a million plays, man. It just was – they were just going. Ohio State's always been a real fast team. Clemson's been a real fast team. Alabama's got is the team that's got more of that pro-style thing. And, again, I'm bringing up Alabama not because you're trying to mimic Alabama, but it's like the Sarkisian is more – to me, more from a family of coaches, like an offensive family than, like, say, a Notre Dame than a Clemson is. Clemson's a pure college spread. Bama's a pro-style spread. That's more of like what Notre Dame is, right? And the reason I'm pointing to Bama is, you go look at 2019, right? Alabama was like ranked. I'm trying to look at it here, Vince. They ranked 93rd in total number of plays.
Okay.
Right? They ranked second in yards per play. Right? So it's not so much about how many plays you run. It's about, the year before they were 10th in plays and like second in yards per play. And to me, those are the things that I look at and say, but then this year, Alabama was first in the nation in total plays, but they weren't as efficient. They only were at 6.5 yards per play, whereas in 2019, they were I believe over 7. Yes, 7.9. 2020, they were 7.8. Well, guess what? That's why Alabama's offense wasn't as good this year. They ran a million plays, right? Led the nation in plays this year. Nobody ran more plays than Alabama. They ran over 1,100 plays this year, right? But they only averaged 6.5 yards per play. So when Bama got in trouble this year, what was the reason? Their offense couldn't move the ball and score. Right. It's why they almost lost to Florida. It's why they almost lost to LSU. It's why they almost lost to Auburn. And it's what killed them in the championship game, right? Against Georgia. And so to me, it's about the efficiency aspect of it. Notre Dame's just not going to be a run 100 plays a game team. They're not going to be Wake Forest. And I'm okay with that.
Yeah, I don't
see that. But the identity has to be established of if we're going to be this way, then you have to be a team that's about fundamentals. It's about playing the game the right way. It's about receivers have to – I mean, if you got to take away a half of a team period to focus on technique and fundamentals in the spring, do it. Do it. Because that's so important to this football team. But that's an identity thing. If you don't believe that's got to be at the core of who you are, then you're not going to practice that way. And that's why I say the spring is about establishing identity. And if they do that, I think it's going to benefit greatly. The younger receivers, like you talked about, Vince, if they can get this 14 practice in the blue gold game to have it pounded into their head, it's not about your talent. It's not about your talent. It's not about your talent, right? That's the thing. It's like when I watch the NFL, it's like, man, the best receivers in the NFL right now, man, they are master craftsmen. I mean, I watched the playoffs and
Cooper Kupp is a perfect example. I know, right?
Cooper Kupp, Adams. I mean, it's all of them. I mean, look, you can't beat Tyreek Hill. I would not have a single receiver ever watch Tyreek Hill film of how to play the game
because he's just
can't run like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Right. It's he can do things that you can't do. Watch Devontae Adams. Watch Cooper Kupp. Watch guys like that don't have elite skill. Because then, if you do have big time skill, like a Deion Colsey, like a Lorenzo Styles, like a Braden Lindsey, and you're taught how to play the game, then how unstoppable are you going to be at that point in time?
Yep.
And that to me that's an identity, right? And it goes through every position, and it's going to be fun to see. It's going to be fun to see. Let's transition over the defense, Vince.
All right, sounds good. So the defense is an interesting one because obviously you have a new defensive coordinator. It's got almost a flip of what was going on offense. Offense changed a bunch of position coaches, same offensive coordinator. Defense, they only changed one position coach, and they've got a new defensive coordinator. So it's a little bit of a reverse. But my first one, I think, is similar to yours. It's still defensive coordinator. You've got to get there. Al Golden just showed up, and spring practice is right around the corner. So there's going to be a get to know you period with a brand new defensive coordinator, and Marcus Freeman has made it very clear that Al Golden is not going to run Marcus Freeman's defense. He's going to run Al Golden's defense, which
it's still going to be
right.
Right.
The principles are going to be similar, but Al Golden's going to be in charge of it, right? So there's still going to be a feeling out period for this defense and understanding what this new guy is all about and how he's going to run his side of the practices and all of that. So the number one thing is Al Golden needs to establish himself as the defensive coordinator, and the guys are going to have to get used to who he is.
I think the person that plays the biggest role in that is not Al Golden. My number one key is Al Golden must be the guy. That was my number one.
Okay.
And of course, obviously, Al Golden has to establish himself and all that. But here's the deal. You listen to the defensive players talk about Marcus Freeman. They absolutely love Marcus Freeman.
Oh, yes.
Like, they love that guy. And if he's constantly around and constantly in meetings on defense and constantly doing this and constantly instructing and all those different things, then they're going to still look at him and
Absolutely.
not Al Golden.
Yes, that's a really good
so
point.
I think the person that plays the biggest role in this is going to be Coach Freeman. And it's going to be about backing up what Coach Golden is saying. Now, here's the thing. Even if it's like, hey, Coach, Coach Golden, this is what I want you to do today. It's got to be Al Golden that delivers that message. And then Coach Freeman is supporting that message. You see what I'm saying? So it's kind of playing some mind games, but he needs Coach Freeman. And I think he wants this. That's why he did what he did during the sprint, during the bowl prep. We heard a lot about how he was purposely not involved in game planning and all that kind of stuff because he wanted the defensive coach to say, I'm the head coach now. You guys got to run this. And I imagine he's going to do the same thing in the spring. And
you know how hard that's going to be for him?
It's going to be incredibly hard.
Yeah,
incredibly hard.
Yeah.
But it's got to be intentional. It's got to be purposeful. It's got to be we're communicating this forward. We're on the same page. I got your back, Coach. That's the thing is, and Coach Golden has to be careful not to make it look like he's, we're not going to do it the Coach Freeman way, which shouldn't be easy because Coach is still there. It's not like he fired the guy, right?
Right. He's still there.
He's got to make it about him. Like he did a great job in the press conference of just constantly talking about Marcus Freeman. And it was a great sign of respect, it was Al Golden saying, hey, listen, you're the head coach, right? Yeah. I get it. And there's I'm 52, you're 36, right? I've been a head coach for 10 years. You've barely been a coach for 10 years, right? It's not that. Look, you're the boss. I came here to work under you, to work with you. He did a great job of that. Now it's Coach Freeman's turn when it comes to the team to say, hey, that's your guy, and when players come to him during the spring and they're frustrated with something, he's got to say, hey, look, you got to understand Coach isn't me. He's not Coach Golden's doing it his way.
It's going to be different. It's going to be different.
Right. You got to understand that. Right. Yeah. And he's got to have Al Golden's back. And I think he will. That's just kind of Marcus Freeman's nature, I think. But to your point, Vince, it's going to be very hard for him. He's going to want to jump in there. But if he is jumping in there, it's got to be times when he's backing up what Al Golden is saying. That's going to be the key. And so that is going to be something that is very going to be very important.
Well, it's going to be one of the things that you're going to be able to see when we're watching practice. You're going to be able to see I'm going to be watching that dynamic, right? Mm-hmm. Okay, they just got done with FSA, which is the stretching. Where does Marcus Freeman go when they split up offense and defense? Yeah. You know what I mean? And what is that dynamic between the players and Al Golden and Marcus Freeman for that matter? What is that dynamic like? And you don't even need to hear what they're saying to see the pointed effort from both of these guys on how that they're running and going through practices.
Right. Number 2 for me is kind of still along the lines of Al Golden. The linebackers have to play better next year. Yeah. And I think there's a lot of technical improvement that needs to happen, but more importantly for me is who's going to step up and seize hold of those jobs. That's something that's very important.
It's wide open, I think.
Defense. Linebacker is a very important part of this defense, right? And does Maris Lewifau step up and emerge? Does who seizes hold of the Mike job? Is it going to be J.D. Bertrand? Is he going to stay at will? Is it going to be Bo Bauer? Those are some big question marks, right? Does Prince Collie take a big jump this spring? Is he a guy that pushes? But whoever it is, I want to see great competition, but I want to see more plays from that group. And that's going to be a big thing. That group being settled is going to be a very big part of this defense for me, Vince. What was your number 2?
I had defensive back depth, and I know that's a very broad way to go about it, but I'm talking corners and safeties, right? And I think there needs to be established at least your depth to figure out, okay, now are we going to, move somebody? Is Clarence going to move maybe back to safety? Do you need him there? Can Xavier Watts move over to offense? All of these different things. I think you need to establish okay, these are the guys that we're probably going to be counting on in the fall. Okay. And this is coming out of spring. Now, I will preface all of this with, because I've mentioned Xavier Watts. I want him to be on offense at the start of spring.
Right.
And I'm
but
going
it
to ride
doesn't
that.
look like right now.
I know. I'm going to ride that horse till she bucks me. But I'm just saying,
Right.
I still think that you need to have, like, at safety, you need to figure out, okay, what is the depth chart going to look like? Who are we going to be counting on? What is that 1 to 2 deep, maybe 3 is going to look like? And then, okay, who are these? Not leftover. That's not necessarily the right way to put it. But if they're not going to be contributing, are they in the right spot? Or do we need to move them where they can contribute, right? And I think that there's so many question marks at the defensive back position, corner, safety, that I think you need to start talking that way. I think that's kind of an important thing to figure out. And I have all the faith in the world in Coach Mickens and Coach O'Leary that they're going to be able to figure this out, maybe share some players, things along that line. But what does that depth chart look like? When they're coming out of spring, I think they need that needs to be more in focus to where it is right now.
That kind of leads to my number 3, Vince, which is the court more narrowly. For me, one of the biggest things this spring is I want to see a battle at corner.
Yeah.
Right.
Exactly.
I don't know.
Absolutely.
I don't know if Cam Hart's going to be out there full time this spring. I'm giving me a sneeze, Vince. So just
no problem.
Give me a second. It just like hit me. I think it's past now. But I don't think Cam Hart's going to be. As I was getting ready, I don't think Cam Hart's going to be out there like just nonstop. I think he's a guy that is going to be limited during the spring, just because of some work that had to be no big deal. It was just like, hey, let's do it now. Yeah, be fine.
He's established himself though. Like he's one of the guys
that still needs a lot of work, but
absolutely.
I think the spring isn't necessarily as important for him. But you know, I want to see whoever steps into that spot in the spring really make a lot of plays. I want to see Clarence Lewis get pushed. Here's the deal. I don't care if Clarence Lewis starts in the fall. I just want Clarence Lewis to start because he proved himself to be the best guy after a fierce battle with some ascending young players. If Clarence Lewis is just kind of anointed as the next cornerback or that he's just there, then either A, you did a poor job with your first 2 recruiting classes if you're Coach Mickens, and I don't think he did. I think he did a really good job. But the concern I have is I was a little concerned last year on defense that the defense was a little bit too much like the offense had been in the past, where veterans who kept struggling – veterans. I mean, Clarence was just a sophomore, but he's still older than all the other guys in the corner. Right. That just kept being thrown out there, and nobody else was getting that shot.
Right.
And the same thing kept happening. Right. Now, the thing about Clarence Lewis is he was a sophomore last year. He's going to get better. And he was never as bad as he looked in that bowl game. It was just a bad game. I mean, he's better than that, but he still has to be better than he was in the previous 12 games. Right. And if he's going to start, just fine. I don't have any problem with Clarence Lewis starting. But if he's just starting because the other guys just aren't ready yet, that's a problem for me. And that's a big problem for me. And that's – I don't know what it means. I don't know if they're not being coached. I don't know if they're just not talented, if they're not – there's a million things it could mean, but it's going to be a problem. You know, I want to see Tariq Bracy and I want to see Clarence Lewis get pushed hard to where either A, they get beat out, or B, they're starting because they had to raise their game to a level where you're going to get the quarterback play you need. And so to me, it's not about like, I don't think anyone should be rooting against Clarence Lewis. I don't think anyone should be like, man, I hope he gets beat out. I don't care who plays. I just want whoever to play to be really, really good.
Sure.
Right. And if that means Clarence Lewis really raises his game up in a big way and goes out there and plays the way you hope he can play, because he had to hold off Phillip Riley and Ryan Barnes and Chance Tucker and Jaden Mickey and Benjamin Morrison. Morrison won't be there in the spring, but we're kind of fast forwarding to the
projecting.
fall.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, then that's fine. If those guys all raised their game and played hard and you feel really good about them, but Clarence is still just better, then that's okay, because that means he's going to play better on Saturdays.
Right.
But this spring, he's got to become a better player. But I need to see him get challenged. And if he doesn't get challenged, that's a very concerning thing for me.
Yeah.
So that was kind of my third thing. Is so the secondary's got to play better than it did last year. I think Brandon Joseph coming into the safety position with Ramon Henderson and Xavier Watts now getting another year of experience is going to make them better. And Houston Griffith, we talked about the other day, is just really taking on a big-time leadership role in the secondary. Now, he has to say, that's all fine and dandy, but now you got to go make some plays, man.
Absolutely.
But so that's all. But I have a lot more confidence in the safety position just because there's some talent there. Way more questions about corner.
Sure.
And so to me, those questions need to be somewhat silenced by the end of spring.
Yes.
You talk about spring objectives. That's kind of what we looked into. Corner is a position where I don't want to be as concerned about it by the end of spring as I am going into spring.
Need more clarity there. You need it.
Thing.
And I will say I was a little bit surprised that Coach Mickens didn't throw some other guys out there during the season. I was a little surprised about that. Now, that could have come from over his head. I mean, that's definitely a possibility, and I'm not ruling that part out. Mm-hmm. But I was anticipating some other guys getting some opportunities, and it never happened. And so I'm hoping that happens at least in the spring, right? I mean, let those guys establish themselves in the spring so that you have more clarity moving forward.
Right. Your third thing, Vince, was interior defensive line.
Yeah, right? and I'll touch on it real quick because we're running out a little bit of time. But interior defensive line, I think, is still it's an open position, right? I mean, look, Jason Adamiola, super happy that he's back. I mean, he's obviously going to anchor some things. But what is that rotation?
Although I don't expect him to play a bunch during the spring.
Right, and there you go. So,
which is going to be good for Notre Dame because you know what he is, right?
Yeah, exactly. The guys that I'm not as concerned about in the spring. Spring is an opportunity for guys that we don't know, to battle and show coaches what they can do.
Well, and who plays where, Vince? Is Riley
exactly
Mills going to be a three technique? Is he going to be a big end?
You nailed it.
Is Howard Cross going to stay at nose tackle, where Elson was obsessed with him playing despite being 265 pounds? Is he moved to three technique behind Jason Adamiola with Jacob Lacey stepping in the starting lineup, and then you bumping up
all of those
Gabriel
things.
Rubio and Aiden Counter? I mean, there's Jason. Where does Jason Onye play? Does he stay at big end? You're going to move him inside, let him kind of develop as a three technique. Who backs up Isaiah Foskey? To me, like just D line wise, like that's the reason D line for me is not really a focus, because I think for me the spring for the D line is just figuring out who fits best where.
Right, absolutely.
That's the thing for me. But to your point, I think along the interior, you need to start to see some younger guys really establish themselves as like, hey, I'm ready to go. You need to see Jacob Lacey. Okay, I had my surgery. I had a year to recover from it. I lost some weight. I'm putting that weight back on. Now it's time for me to go do what I know I can do, right? He's got to show it, right? Because if he does that, then that makes you more flexible with Howard Cross. He doesn't have to stay at nose. Right. You need Aiden Keanaaina to have a big spring. You need Gabriel Rubio to have a big spring. You need those young guys to say, hey, look, y'all, we got this. We can play too. And then that allows you to kind of, hey, look, we're comfortable with where we are inside. We can move Riley Mills out to big end. Right. We really like the two young nose tackles. We're going to move Gabriel to nose tackle, got Aiden Counter at nose tackle. We can play Howard Cross in more of a three technique where his game is better suited. So I think all those things are important. But to your point, Vince, the interior, your specific one was the interior D-line depth is in focus.
Right.
And so it's not like we know what Jason can do. We know what Jake, it's what about the rest of those guys?
Exactly. Because
now that Kurt Heinisch is gone. Right.
And there it is. Right. And so again, you know what you get with Jason. And so we know there's talent there. Like my curiosity and my objective, right, is not about the talent level. It's about where they fit and what that rotation could potentially look like. Because again, there's going to be more three front potentially, right? There's going to be four front. And so what does that look like? Are you going to move guys outside to inside, during the games? Like, what does that look like? Because you've got a ton of talent on the defensive line, a ton of talent, and you can move guys around. So I would like to see that in focus a little bit more, coming out of spring for sure.
Yep. All right. Sean S. with a super chat before we get at her. IB makes me want to move from Los Angeles to South Bend and get season tickets. Well, yeah, there's a million reasons you should move out of Los Angeles. And the cost of living here is way better than it is there. I just don't know where you work.
Not even close. I'd be living in a cardboard box if I lived in LA. And there's no question about that.
Yeah. But no, we appreciate that. We appreciate that very much, Sean. Appreciate the super chat very much. So, Vince, that's going to do it for today's show, man. Why don't you take us out of here?
Absolutely. We want to thank everybody for joining us on our wonderful Thursday here at Irish Breakdown. Make sure that you hit that like button. Somebody said that we got over 300 people watching, only 65 likes. Hit that like button, everybody. Come on now. Help us out a little bit. Subscribe. Hit that notification bell because obviously Brian and Ryan. They have their night show on Wednesday with recruiting. By the way, everybody, go check out that show that they did last night because they broke down the quarterback position from a recruiting standpoint, and it's gold. It's literal gold, people. So please go check out that show that was on last night. But share this with your family and friends. Really appreciate it. If you're listening to us on the podcast, go ahead and give us a 5-star review. Yeah, leave us a comment or two. I like reading those every now and again. So go ahead and leave us a comment, and then make sure you subscribe there as well and share with your family and friends. But for Brian, I'm Vince. Thanks for listening to the Irish Breakdown Podcast, and we will talk to you tomorrow because tomorrow, folks, is the Friday free-for-all mailbag. Best day of the week, people. Let's go.